Hello, welcome to another episode of Scuttlebutt. I'm Nick. I'm here with Vic.
Hey.
And William.
Howdy.
And today we are digging into Ukraine. But first, before we do that, Mr. Ruble, happy birthday.
Oh. Hey,
happy
Mr.
birthday.
Wilson, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Oh. Happy birthday to both of you.
I had nachos in the office yesterday, guys, and you both missed it.
Yeah. I'm in the office.
I mean, you're in the office.
So, yeah.
Were you here yesterday?
No, I wasn't here yesterday.
Yeah, so you didn't. You
but
missed the nachos.
on my birthday, I'm here.
That's true. I was here too, but
you were here.
but the nachos.
But you had nachos. I've got a bottle of water. But I have all of these wonderful listeners to join me
all
on
these
my
dear listeners.
Yeah, these dear listeners in my celebration.
Anyway, now that we've celebrated, let's look at the dark stuff overseas.
Let's get a little less.
I was really
jovial.
excited because you said digging into Ukraine. Well, guess who else is digging into Ukraine right now? But anyways.
Ba-dum-bum.
Ba-dum-bum. All right, so Russia has stalled out. So last I saw that they've actually lost ground, but they're kind of in consolidation mode. So what are we thinking here?
Yeah,
okay.
So if you go on and literally Google Russian invasion map, you can get daily updates on where it is, and it actually looks like based on what we see here that Ukraine has started to do some counterattacks around. Especially around Kiev, but a little also in the Kharkov region, and also some south near. Please forgive my English. Kherson region. That Russia is starting to get. Again, nothing major, nothing I would say wholly significant, but there has been some advances made by the Ukrainian forces.
And the Kharkiv region that's the second largest city in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
It was the hardest hit in the first few days of the war because I think Russia was thinking if Kharkiv falls, all that's left is Kiev. And the fact that it was almost entirely surrounded, never fell.
Well, even in Mariupol, they haven't capitulated.
They haven't capitulated, but they're really paying.
There's not going to be anything left, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's secured.
Now, what's crazy about Mariupol too is before the invasion ever happened, Russia was already in the Donetsk region, and they were already in Crimea, so they were already surrounded before the invasion ever started.
Yes.
So the fact that they've been able to hang on as they have is pretty inspiring.
Well, and the fact that they haven't made it to Odessa is also kind of crazy, especially considering, and we talked about this, the potential of an amphibious landing.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, I have been so shocked, obviously, by the terror and just the loss of life and the wanton destruction, but at the same time, I was just so impressed with the Ukrainian forces and how they've been able to really hold the bear at bay.
Yeah, and I think that too kind of goes into talking about training and education and stuff, because after the Donbass situation in 2014, Ukraine had just been cycling troops in to go get seasoning and be able to learn and then come back and do some training and education. They were on this like rotating cycle of every couple months. They would go in, try and fight the rebels, come back, share what they learned and all this kind of stuff. So they're kind of in a position where they've been working towards this for 8 years, whereas the Russian troops are kind of just showing up green. So I think you're seeing that too, especially if you see the footage of how the Russians react when they get attacked.
Yeah, I would say very green because they're also just so poorly informed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, for all our listeners you come back to us many times, one of our recurring guests, Andrew Milburn, is actually currently over in Ukraine with Task and Purpose, and he's written several great articles on it. And like one thing that's been noticed, especially, is how that Russians are very attached to their armored vehicles and armored personnel carriers, and it's a false sense of security being so drawn in and close to those vehicles, because you can by thinking you're safe around that area, you just are leaving yourself vulnerable to high casualties that they've been suffering.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, being a Met guy, you're only fully embarked to get from your basically line of departure to your assault position. You're not trying to assault through an objective. You're not allowing. It definitely provides you a thin-skinned defense against small arms fire and some of the effects of indirect fire, because artillery rounds, the air burst. So you get protection from that. But yeah, once you're like well within the max effective range of, you're getting guys out. I mean, it's for the vehicle safety.
Dismount, yeah.
And it's for, like you said, because a single vehicle gets hit, that's 18 guys done.
And how it's looked like tactically from a scene from a lot of footage is like essentially these armored personnel carriers will roll up, drop the guys out. There'll be a gunfight almost immediately, and then they'll just
Well, they got
back.
zero dispersion.
Yeah.
They roll like column formation, like no real tactical mindset that you can really differentiate. They don't use the terrain to their advantage, and I know they've had issues with maintenance, getting bogged down in the mud, these sorts of things. Again, that all comes from just super poor training. And really, it just seems like zero familiarization with how to actually use the weapon systems. And
going back to the word mindset you use, for our Marine listeners, this is a very good education on in the essence of like the opposite of maneuver warfare, where you have like this high centralized command and control, which is necessary if your force consists of mostly green raw recruits who have little combat experience, and the fact that we see like a lot of like high Russian casualties among the officer corps, especially, you see on the news a lot, like a general or two have been killed repeatedly.
A couple of 3 stars.
So it's you're seeing like how that plays out in the 21st century like operating environment where
and I think it has more to do. I'm just going to push back a little bit on the having the green, because throughout many phases of our long war, I mean, kids were we're coming out of boot camp SOI, and then we're getting on the plane. And where I think we differentiate ourselves, we being the West, and I'm really kind of more talking, UK, Australia, Germany, us obviously, are real close allies, and not even all of them within NATO, but those who really foster that senior enlisted advisor, the junior, sort of pushing leadership down to the lower levels, distributed leadership, and dispersed formations. We have that ability you can take a fairly green unit, where you're getting guys that are practically right out of SOI and still have a lot of success, because those NCOs are seasoned, they are experienced, and they are trusted to be able to lead without a ton of micromanagement.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I imagine from what I understand of like Russian training and education, it's not to the same standards as the West has. Like, we're able to actually, true. It's like we are green, they're green alike, as Abraham Lincoln said before the Civil War. It's like we're all green. It's gonna happen, but like the level of training and like the strong officer and also like, SNCO core that you have there will be a great indicator, and it seems like that they're lacking that.
For sure, you're 100% correct there. I mean, the lack of, because the NCO does so much more than just lead the troops. I mean, they are sort of in a lot of ways like your standard bearers, because those lance corporals will look at the sergeant and staff sergeant and be like, that's me in 5 years. That doesn't always happen with the officer corps when you're talking junior enlisted, even to junior officer. Yeah, they're sort of relatively in the same generational period, but there is a stigma, institutional, that is necessary, and there isn't that same level of familiarization or there's not. What an officer does doesn't always necessarily resonate with what the junior enlisted life experience, if that makes any sense.
Well, like in like the Marine Corps specifically, like we push trust down. Where like from what we've seen in Russia and the Russian military is like they keep trust up.
Yeah, and I think conversely, you're seeing it from the Ukrainians. I don't know. I know obviously they're former Soviet, but they've made so many. I think it seems to me, and Andy Milburn would know this being right there, but it seems to me that they've embraced the more European ideology, the view of war and how to conduct war. They've adopted more of a European mindset because they are operating in these hunter-killer teams. They're doing distributed operations, small unit tactics.
Yeah.
And so I think just by proxy of where they are in this fight, they have no choice but to trust those. I don't even know if you call them NCOs, but those leaders that are with the leaders of those teams.
Well, Andy Milburn actually mentioned in one of his articles that
awesome.
there's actually a good coordination between locals and the Ukrainian military to guide them and like infiltrate through Ukrainian lines and to get them in a position where they can bring whatever firepower they can to bear against Russian assets. So they very much like using, I don't even say like, I wouldn't say Western necessarily, because you could probably correlate to like what a lot of Ukrainians are doing to like what a lot of Vietnamese did during like the French Indochina Wars.
It's almost colonial.
Yeah,
it's fighting. It's
yeah.
like local, almost militia type situations.
Yeah,
coordinating with a larger umbrella command structure.
Right.
And I really hope it's making a lot of Marine leaders and also just American military leaders like rethink a lot of like the goose that laid the golden eggs that we have, especially because us at Scuttlebutt love bring up the tank reference. But like maybe we were wrong in the sense where like maybe not wrong because we kind of been neutral in that whole discussion, but I think the Ukraine conflict with Russia currently is showing that how the age of the tank is either dwindling or needs to be redefined.
Yeah, you're really you're hurting me deep inside here. there is value in armor formation because I think it goes without saying that if we were to show up into Poland and like, hey, here's a shit ton of M1A1s. Could you guys use these? I don't think the Ukrainians would turn them down. Like, I don't know, we're doing great with our jabs and our stingers, but you are absolutely right as far as employment and how they're employed. And I think from what Force Design 2030 is trying to do and what the Commandant's looking at, and I think the ACMAC really put it very well when he said it's a cube and weight issue more than anything else, is because from what I can get out of those 70 tons where the ship weights out before it cubes out, I can put a lot of other stuff in here that does in a combined arms effort maybe the same sort of thing that a main battle tank would actually do. And I think you're absolutely right. When you look at what's going on in Ukraine, it's hard to push back on that because of what loitering munitions are doing, what unmanned, unpiloted drone, automated systems are able to do, what hunter-killer teams are able to do.
Yeah, and it also might be kind of almost a rock, paper, scissors situation, too, where people have been throwing rocks so much that all the defenses know to throw paper, which is very anti-tank and very capable at taking out heavy armor, very logistically reliant pieces that might circle back around sometime in the not too distant future is now all of a sudden being what you need in order to break through, in order to devastate, in order to
and so I think, God, I'm so scatterbrained right now, so I apologize for this, but there's so many things that are coming to mind as we're talking about this. But like one of the things that I think where we're seeing sort of the consequences of divesting of certain things is so where you could. I would say from the outside looking in that it seems like momentum, if it hasn't at least gone 50-50, is shifting towards the Ukrainians. But because they've been using so many defensive type weapon systems, they don't have that, for lack of a better term, that ass to now do a really effective counterattack. And that's obviously where, God, man, if we only had a couple main battle tanks, we could really do a lot of damage here. And then another, I guess, modern day context is if you look at Phantom Fury and the Battle of Fallujah, we use armor a lot in those situations in an urban environment because they are devastating weapons platforms, but you have to use them. Unlike how the Russians employ their stuff, what we were talking earlier. Hey, just get in and ride, fellas, and we're ride or die, literally.
What was, I guess, I
get them out and you. It's a almost symbiotic relationship between that tank or that AAV or that LAV and then the dismounts. Like everybody's alive because everybody's working together to keep each other alive.
I guess as the historian in me and like the person who's never served in the military ever, what was, I guess, the anti-tank capability in Fallujah?
RPGs.
Yeah, and then like I guess
and IEDs.
How effective were those against?
Very
effective.
100. Like if we had just rolled in with say first tanks into Fallujah and just tried to armor it out, we would have lost a lot of very good Marines. And go ahead.
Sorry, I guess
Yeah,
I have a
yeah.
series of questions to ask. So, like, I guess were they effective as in like a single RPG hit could take out a tank,
No.
or was the idea like that? Like, I guess the tactic was like an RPG barrage.
It is. It's sapper teams.
So-
100%. Yeah.
So I guess so with good infantry support, you could keep those.
That's
those-
100%
okay.
correct.
So my question is,
Yeah.
though, like, as technology gets better, and I can imagine, like Russia is capturing javelins and other things, and has their own proficient anti-tank systems, and those are going to get better. And then eventually, as time goes on, those will be proliferated down through. We'll probably see like these systems throughout other conflicts.
But if you don't get your guys out the back, those things are not going to matter. And the best way that you can counter that stuff is to get your guys out. And I think what we're seeing is that old Soviet doctrine of just like rolling thunder. They don't dismount their guys. And if you don't dismount your guys, it's just a 70-ton coffin.
And speaking of those
Yeah,
guys,
Nick,
those guys are.
Yeah.
You brought up the javelins, which brought up a almost hilarious anecdote type of a situation here. And so the Russians. So right after the battle started and the Ukrainians got pushed back in the east really fast, they were leaving a lot of the Stinger systems that we left for them behind. They're big and heavy, and you can't carry them, and you're moving fast. And so the Russians that picked them up were not turning them in because they're valuable battle trophies. So these young Russians are like trying to smuggle them back into Russia just to like put on the mantle.
Like an
it's
actual armed.
Yeah, like
or like hawk on the black market.
or hawk on the black market because they're so valuable. But it's like they see this. They don't see it as a weapon of war. They see it as an opportunity
A war trophy.
for prestige or for cash.
Yeah.
So
To be fair, I mean, like, because I think when I was talking to my dad, like the rules in the United States military on that has changed on war trophies. But
Oh,
like,
dude, I have an anecdote on that. So
yeah, go for it.
So we're consolidating in Baghdad in 03. Everyone's like, we're so happy with ourselves. A lot of high-fiving, back-slapping, like, and they come down. And so, like, as we're starting to retrograde guys back on the ship and whatever, whoever's down there inspecting all the cargo is like, what in the hell are you guys? 'Cause they're finding war trophies just stashed away, like in deck plates and 7 cubes and like all this stuff. Like, dude, you can't bring like live ordnance like into. And so,
God, I hate
so then
this
they had this
country.
standing order, like a unit, and I think it was like a battalion-sized unit was the lowest level that could have one war trophy. And so then everybody, like, we had this, like, everyone had I think it was like a 72-hour amnesty. Dump all your shit, and we're not going to then charge you on the UCMJ. Just get rid of it, blah, blah, blah. And if you want it, you have to, like, submit a formal thing up. It has to be, like, completely demilled, all this other stuff. And so over the next 3 days, we end up with, like, this massive, like, a pile of just weapons. The guys were just ridiculous stuff. I think actually a piece of the Saddam Hussein or a Saddam Hussein trophy was like pure gold, like his finger like pointing up or whatever, like this massive, as big as a basketball, was like in this pile of shit.
What a
that
waste.
someone was like trying to smuggle in their sea bag or something.
As a historian, when my dad was like telling me like stories over there, like we'd find like stashes of like German weapons, MG42s, like Sturmgewehrs, like PPSHs from the Soviet. Like, God, if you could just mail those back piece by piece to me, like,
I'm not going to name his name
that.
because he's actually really working for the State Department now. But my XO, when I was a company commander at Charlie Company, we went in Iraq in 07, 08. Man, we were finding all kinds of cool stuff. And he's a huge gun nut. Like, he loves guns. We found this, I think it was a Dishka. Perfect.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, still practically in its cosmoline. And, it was obviously going to be used against us. It was buried and wrapped in plastic so that whoever would come along, just grab it and, start shooting Marines with us. So we grabbed it. We had to put it in our makeshift armory that we had in our compound. Man, I swear to God, it was like a kid looking at his stuffed animal in the washing machine. Like he was just at the cage of the armory, just stared like, look at that dish cut. I'm like, XO, get away from the armory, man. Like I used to have like my ops chief like check it almost every few days to make sure there weren't pieces missing from it.
No, if things ever get bad over there and my wife divorces me, I'm gonna happily go over and just try to find all these caches of stuff and just live the historian's dream.
That was a massive rabbit hole, but yeah, the war trophy thing is real, and it's ubiquitous. That's not that's neither Eastern or Western. That is just a dude thing.
Why did they take that away? Why did they take that away from our soldiers and Marines and sailors and such? Why did that's such like a good morale boosting thing?
Yeah, I don't know. That pile was. So we just got to think. Sorry, is this we can say this? Okay. Yeah, I just got a Colonel Woodbridge, our editor-in-chief, senior editor, just let us know that Vladimir, just ordered 134,500 conscripts called up, and that came from the Defense Ministry of the UK.
Yeah, I saw a article on Reuters today, and apparently they're supposedly not supposed to be
using conscripts.
Well, I think these specific 134,000 are not supposed to be used in Ukraine, which either means A, they're going to free up other men and units throughout Russia to go into Ukraine, or surprise, surprise, Putin lies and they wind up in Ukraine on a training exercise.
Right. They get lost on doing land nav.
Yeah, and then.
But yet they're fully armed.
Then you just this looks like it's kind of similar to the Pripyat map on Stalker. Oh wait, we're in Ukraine.
I just have this feeling that they're all gonna be carrying jerry cans of gas, running in, dropping them off, turning around, and running back. Like
they need food and ammo. Yeah, they're just gonna be like a daisy chain of. This is their logistics train. These guys,
they're all standing around just
shoulder.
like passing off like the water bucket. Yeah, like gas.
Yeah,
gas.
Food, ammo.
Food.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because this is yet again another thing where the Russian, information campaign just can't get out of its own way, because they said early on they weren't going to use conscripts, even though it was clear that there were conscripts already there. Now he's just making it official, and then same thing with the withdrawal. Yeah. Which no one believed that, and it's not.
The withdrawal, I think, isn't heavy quotes. I think you mentioned, we talked about the initiative and how you think Ukraine has made it. I think I would be hesitant to say I think Russia is trying to grasp onto it and reconsolidate. But again, because Ukraine doesn't really have much of a kickback opportunity. I think the initiative is almost in the air at the moment.
Yeah. I think we are on a precipice here, and clearly this is a war that Putin can't lose. And there's a lot of reporting that he's been misinformed, uninformed, that his generals are just flat out lying to him about how things are going. So this is very, very interesting as we make a very abrupt segue away from war trophy collections. But
well, in addition to that, Belarus has 40 to 60,000 troops that aren't conscripts ready to go, and it's hearsay, but I just can't see how, if Belarus gets involved directly, Poland doesn't get involved directly.
Somebody else doesn't jump in. Well, here's my thought on that, and I guess we talked a little bit before the show about Azerbaijan and Armenia, and some of these sort of what Dr. Hunziker would call sort of these brush fire conflicts leading up to this, and then like you were mentioning Crimea and the Donbass, and how the Ukrainians would basically use that as like almost like a training exercise.
Yeah.
Like that was their CAX. Like go into the Donbass and get some experience. But from an experience standpoint, I can't imagine that Belarus has any.
I don't know what they would have been involved in. Yeah. Aside from internal,
just policing of the state.
Yeah.
So you're gonna send these guys into the meat grinder. That's not gonna. I don't see that as going. I don't think the Belarusians should be very, very excited about this prospect when they've got. I mean, zero.
I have to remember though, like the old ethnic and national fears and hatreds are still very real So I think, I mean, we don't know what access to information that they have, and how they've seen the conflict so far.
Right.
Well, there was for a long time there. Lukashenko was the last dictator of Europe. I kind of threw that up in quotes because we can add Putin to that.
Right.
But was the last dictator in Europe, and like it's an uninterrupted dictatorship going all the way back to when they were still in the Soviet Union, right? So, I would imagine that the Belarusian people have no idea what's going on.
And they've again, like they're been fed, you know, Putin and Belarus and propaganda their entire lives. They probably think very little poorly of the Ukrainians, and also on top of that, the issue of, you know, Nazism in Eastern Europe as a whole, not just Ukraine,
right,
is very real to them, and just bringing upon those old generational fears that they've grown up with and their parents and grandparents have grown up with.
Yeah.
I mean, it works. I mean, if you actually, because we talk about how like a lot like the current situation where that we live in is more akin to like World War I era than World War II era, and the fact that, like, you know, during World War I that the Allies and the Central Powers played off of these fears of all these smaller nations in Europe to try to pull them into the conflict, and then what happens is you essentially have an untrained, poorly equipped army that gets thrown into a meat grinder. So this could be a sort of a similar circumstance to that.
Yeah, I don't know what the escalation or the response is if another country starts sending in troops. I can't imagine that bodes well for Europe, because even
Or the world.
which is what I was going to get at is that this, like, the spillover of that, and I guess I'm still, this isn't a fully formed thought, but I mean, those Belarusians, you know, send tens of thousands of guys into this area. They have like literally no idea what's going on. They start getting hammered. They come home and are like, you know, trying to explain what's actually going on. The government shuts that down, but I mean, that message is gonna get out, and then things just, I think, just start to unravel. Then at that point, I mean, not that they aren't already, but I don't know how, because right now it's for the Russian and Russian allies. It's very sanitized because they can control the messaging, at least within their own borders. You start adding in people, or adding in other countries, other agencies, other folks with a vested interest who are also just as blind, and now their eyes are open to what's going on, and they start getting hammered. I mean, how does the Belarusians then explain, like, hey, we've got tens of thousands of guys who either aren't coming home or coming back, like, mangled mentally and physically, and this was just supposed to be some sort of special operations that we're helping out Big Brother. I don't know how that plays.
Yeah, and part of that too is they just had that recent referendum. We're going to put the referendum in quotes because who knows how free the election was, obviously. But where they were like 85% of Belarusians were like, yeah, give us those Russian nukes. We need to be able to hit Berlin. You know, like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and like spillover too. Like, I don't see, like, if it does explode out, there is, I feel like the overwhelming technology numbers and all of that stuff is on the side of anybody who, if NATO gets involved on that side of the
The West,
on that side of the equation. But like, it's still like, that's not going to be easy. And then you're gonna, it's not just gonna be there, because then we're gonna end up in Georgia again. We're gonna the Caucasus will be a mess.
Well, you were mentioning
who knows what's
that's
going to happen
already
with
that's already
Turkmenistan, and yeah.
Well, you were mentioning that's already a powder keg because
so
of the refugee situation.
Oh yeah, and so there's people fleeing Russia who the numbers are hard to gauge, but I've heard between 250 and 300,000 people have fled Russia. They are trying to get to Armenia because Armenia is fairly Russian friendly. But one of the ways they get out is through Georgia, and they're kind of spilling into Georgia, these Russians who should, in theory, be like the intellectual, more scholarly types who speak
the
out
brain
against the
drain
government.
that everyone's talking about. Yeah,
the brain drain Russians. But the Georgians don't see them that way. They see them as Russians. They see them as, you guys are awful to us. We cannot stand the look of your face.
Yeah.
Get out of our country.
Yeah, it's like same song, second verse. Like we've done this dance already.
The last Russians who came in here totally effed us up. We don't we don't want you. Like, so, and that's all a mess.
And then they've got a ton of Ukrainian refugees.
And their Ukrainian refugees are also going that direction because Ukrainians are going any direction they can.
Yeah.
And some of them are being forced into Russia, and who knows what's going to happen with that. That just sounds like a terrible
Oh,
situation.
absolutely.
We are, and I want to kind of cycle this around too, back to you, Vic, because we are have brought in tens of thousands of Ukrainians to America, or promising to. We kind of made the same promise to the Afghans, but we did not even come close to reaching what we said we were.
Yeah, we probably should have started this episode with a caveat that please follow up on anything that we say, because admittedly, we're trying to take in all this information as quickly as we can, and it's a lot. It's drinking from a fire hose, and so my data on this isn't awesome. But yeah, you're right. I think we're at tens of thousands of Ukrainians, or at least we've authorized the acceptance of tens of thousands of Ukrainians, and it's a good thing. And I'm not trying to put a blight on that, but I do want to juxtapose it with our treatment of Afghan refugees and our hesitance and our reticence and the tens of thousands that we promised. Like, no kidding. Hey, you are cleared hot to come in, and then we only brought in like 3,000 of them, and just left all those folks in there. So I mean, that scab is still very fresh.
Yeah.
And I know, obviously, and rightfully so, Ukraine is dominating the headlines right now, but there are things going on still that are a bit of a head scratcher. I don't know why there's this disparity when it comes to refugees, especially considering everything that we did and everything that these Afghans did for us while we were there. Why this is an issue. Not to say that we should cut back on Ukrainian refugees. I think that's a very worthwhile and worthy cause, but I don't know why
maybe because the Ukrainian refugees are seen as being
European.
No, temporary. Whereas the Afghan refugees are more of a permanent solution. Maybe that's part of it.
But the stuff I've seen on the news of the Ukrainians is they're integrating into our society.
Are they?
Yeah, I mean, they're not in camps.
So this is in our first live fact checking on Scuttlebutt. CBS News. This article came out the 18th, so I don't probably could find something more recent. But I think it's more like we've opened up the option. I don't think we've had a lot come over necessarily already. And I'm double checking to see how many we took in Afghanistan. So please keep going.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe that's the thing is that we've technically we opened it up to Afghans too, and then things unraveled so fast
that they couldn't get out.
Right.
Yeah.
But that also just it's a head scratcher on the planning on it. Then I don't know, but and maybe because for the vast. As we're looking at this map, I mean, the from a real estate standpoint, Kiev is still in control. Mm-hmm. There's no regime change. Afghanistan, the Taliban took over within a few days.
Yeah, and it's sounding like that's not going well. Like that's still a festering wound. So
yeah, I do appreciate at least them, admitting they're going to be more moderate. I mean, I think at least publicly saying that they're going to seek to have a more moderate regime is a
I was just reading a story about them closing down the girls' schools, though, and that's creating a whole mess of problems. And
for sure. Well, I mean, the treatment of women in Afghanistan is just it's disheartening.
So, according to the source we're using, Al Jazeera, over the past 20 years, 74,000 Afghans are now living in the United States. I don't know how many of that was from the recent fall of Afghanistan.
Like the past 8 months,
the past 8 months. And this article did come out in February.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that the last statistic I saw was that we had promised upwards of like 23,000 Afghans before the gyro fell. We'd promised them visas to come over because of everything that they did to help us. And this was like the full-on, like the full process, like troops, soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, filling out all the paperwork, getting it approved to the State Department, and getting no kidding, they're approved to come over. 23,000 of those folks, and only 3 made it at the time when gyro fell. Like you said, at this point, it may be more.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but also as we were looking at spillover, and we're looking at other headlines that aren't that are sort of on the back page, if you will. We got Yemen.
Yeah, and they're in the news right now too because the what's the minority?
The Houthis.
The Houthis attacked Jeddah last week during the Formula One race.
Yeah, they blew up an oil refinery.
They
or
launched
something.
a missile at them, and it hit about 6 miles away from where the race was being held over on the coast. So that kind of brought that back into the news and kind of got me kind of like I've known about it. It's been this crisis that's been ongoing, but it's so out of the sphere of
It's very peripheral to the
consciousness.
average American, despite taxpayer dollars, but funding what could be considered by many, myself included, a genocide of the Saudis on the Yemenis.
Yeah, I
But,
mean, and again, this could be an episode in and of itself, practically a series if we really wanted to delve into it. So, in a very overly simplistic form, is for those who aren't aware of what's going on in Yemen, it's a civil war. Again, overly simplified, between Shia and Sunni. And then because of that, you have Iran influencing the Houthi and backing them, and then you have Saudi Arabia and UAE essentially backing the government of Yemen, and they are. And we're in Ramadan, and they were trying to before Ramadan actually agree upon a ceasefire so that everyone could worship, and they weren't able to do it, and so things have started to escalate again. And as for anybody who's been in the Middle East and has been participated in the long war, you understand the seasons. And as we're getting into the spring, and climates are more moderate, we're getting into the fighting season, and so you're going to see an uptick, basically from now and then before summer. And then things will sort of shut down as things get hot, and then they'll pick back up in the fall. But yeah, this is essentially, it's been going on in earnest since 2014. It's really been going on since like the Arab Spring in 2011 is where the sort of the seedbed of this was all coming from. But yeah, probably the largest humanitarian crisis that we were facing prior to the war in Ukraine. So
I think the caveat I would add to that is I would think it's the largest, but the issue is because it's very peripheral to the average American. It's not getting as much attention as Ukraine is, and also
and because it's been going on for almost over a decade.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is also, like, to be fair, it is a very complex. You need to do a lot of back reading and research to even have a semi clue on what's going on there.
It's gotten
and American involvement in it, let alone that.
Well, beyond that, it's gone complicated. It's like you peel back one layer of the onion. You peel back another layer of the onion. You peel back another layer. Like, it just never ends. Like
An endless onion.
Like,
and
you're
just like an onion, it's going to make you cry.
It's going to make you cry, yeah. So you pull, switching from an onion to a thread, like you pull on one thread out of the ball there, and all of a sudden, like, 5 more threads are clinging to it, because now you're, like, looking at Yemen and Saudi Arabia, and you're like, oh, wait, how did Somalia get involved? What's Djibouti doing here?
Yeah.
What, China? What's going on? Like, and then it's just...
Yeah, the UAE that amphibious itself from Eritrea.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just a civil war in Yemen. It's like it's almost all-encompassing to certain parts of the world, and it's ridiculous how little we know about it.
Yeah, and I think to William's point is that we don't.
Yeah.
I guess both your points. We don't know a lot about it, and it is on the periphery, and it seems like it's very distant from what Americans should be concerning themselves with. It definitely doesn't fall within Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. But at the same time, if we look at what chaos and turbulence on a global scale looks like, it definitely affects all of us, because, I mean, especially as we're in a post-globalized world now. Like, dude, things don't just happen in bubbles, man.
Yeah, because you pull on both of those threads, Yemen and Ukraine, and all of a sudden Venezuela pops out.
Yeah.
Like this opposite side of the world, but now we're talking about lifting our sanctions on Venezuela to get off of Russian oil, and part of that too is OPEC is involved because Venezuela's in OPEC, and now all of a sudden China's involved because China wants OPEC to keep gas prices at a certain level because China is very
Right.
very coal and
Well, then
nuclear
obviously
oriented, and, like,
any turbulence in the Middle East affects the big profit margins for OPEC
And bringing back into everyone's favorite Marine, Smedley Butler, or at least one of my favorite Marines. Definitely be if you're interested to figure out why all these countries are involved, just take a good reread of War is a Racket by Smedley Butler to get like a understanding of, like, in all these conflicts there is always money to be made, a lot of it,
Yeah.
and unfortunately in this I like that term, post-globalized society. Is that what you said?
I think
Post. Oh yeah. Well,
if it wasn't said before, then definitely I got it.
yeah, the globalization part is just about over. It's global now. We're post globalization.
Post.
We're
Yeah.
entering. Oh gosh, no, I'm not. We're tangenting way too hard anyway.
I like it though.
We're entering a post-national world too soon. So, like,
Oh boy.
with the big super governments and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Buckle up, kids.
Yeah, for real. Like, definitely need your 5-point harness. But I will say one nice thing that would really be really great for a lot of these conversations is to get an expert on.
Yeah.
Someone who really knows the ground and could talk to this stuff. And so, I don't know. Let's see what we can do.
All right. Well, we have been chatting now for 40 minutes. Do we want to toss anything onto the fire, or?
I don't know, man. I was all over the place. I don't even know if I can even reel it back in.
Felt
So it was like a central thesis.
Yeah, we were in there. It felt dense. Like, we've been talking for 40 minutes.
I mean, same old, same old. Keep diversifying your sources. Keep educating yourself. Remember, like, we are in times of war in the 21st century, and information is a weapon.
Yeah.
And will always be. So just be careful, be cognizant, and understand, and do your best to diversify.
Yeah, and then I would say for those in uniform, or definitely those who are have business with those in uniform, is like take a look at what's going on. And granted, as much as information is proliferated, it's also sort of source specific too.
Mm-hmm.
So check your sources, but also look and see what's going on, and then just sort of overlay the things that we are doing as we are transforming the force. Is the DOD is looking to find its place post counterinsurgency, and see what's going on, and look at what the criticisms are of some of these new initiatives, but then look and see how things are playing out in real time, and if you can find a sort of an overlap there, and just to do the mental wargaming of, like, what does this all mean for our endeavors in the 21st century.
A great point, Vic. I mean, like, the future of warfare is now, and not looking at any of these, even like small brush fire, at least the United States, like, conflicts are important to study and analyze because they're using the most current technology. And as, like, you looked at in the history of the Marine Corps Gazette, especially, you've seen, like, discussions on, like, the best way to teach and educate is to understand, like, the current application of modern technology and how it can be used, combined with a study of military history.
Yeah.
So if you're able to take those two together, so, like, again, take time, read articles. Like you said, like Andy Milburn, who's been on our show, is currently in Ukraine with Task and Purpose. Take some time, read his articles, and figure out, like, what tactically and strategically is evolving in the conflict of Ukraine, because this is the biggest conflict we've seen on this scale in decades, and it's a great case study to learn and figure out how you can apply the lessons that Russians and Ukrainians are learning right now into your training and education.
Sure. I mean, and even going back to Dr. Hunziker, dying to learn. I mean, we're seeing learning on the battlefield, like, in real time. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean for an organization where we have the benefit to really break down the X's and O's of what's happening? And you also take another angle, and you can look at those who are so regimented in the ways that they used to do business, and they're just absolute inflexibility in adapting without what Andy Milburn would call that, without absolute divestment of intellectual curiosity. What is that looking like? I'm alluding to Russia. So as Russia does their standard textbook stuff, and the Ukrainians are learning on the fly and doing things and adapting to the environment, like, what is that looking like? And I would say that it's not looking good for those who are holding on to antiquated tactics, techniques, and procedures.
Also antiquated and also
doctrine.
like misapplied, because all those times when Russia was asserting their military prowess in other instances, like in Chechnya, Georgia, those are smaller countries with tiny populations with one or two major cities, and when they try to apply the same mantra to Ukraine, they're getting their ass handed to them. Because they didn't learn and evolve from this process, and also they think that the same playbook would work just in a larger situation,
Right.
and it's not.
Right.
Yep. And the other places didn't get shoved full of aid as much.
That's
as
another thing,
Ukraine
because
is.
they were still, within that Russian former Soviet bloc stuff. Ukraine, for all, it's Europe, man.
Yeah, Ukraine was in Europe. It was on the precipice of the EU and
EU.
NATO, and now they need mechanics. That's one of their 3 things they'd like to get from us is repairs. So, all right. Well, let's let that one sit. Let's talk a little bit about. Let's do some housekeeping, guys, before we sign off here. For those who don't know, our good co-host Vic here is going to be spending the next 6 to 9 weeks.
Yeah, it's gonna be a minute.
On the West Coast. So he is going to be out there recording, meeting up with some folks, and hitting up. I can't remember if he's hitting up any schools or anything, but just
I'm gonna be in Cali, and so I'm gonna try to, be visible, I guess, for our West Coast listeners, and we'll still be doing some shows. I'll be calling in remote and doing some interviews while I'm out there and stuff. But I won't be in studio until after like the 4th of July holiday or something crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. So we're going to sound a little different over the course of the beginning of summer here. But Vic is still out there working hard. And if anybody's out there and wants to buy him a beer, he won't say no.
I will not say no, and I might just interview you. So careful.
We've also just submitted the pages for our publications. Anything exciting coming up in Gazette, guys?
Oh man,
keep an eye on the letter section. Sorry, letters to the editor section, the Gazette, because there's some juicy stuff coming up in the next edition. Some really good back and forth, especially we talked about Marinus a couple of weeks ago. Is EABO maneuver warfare, and we've actually a really good letter to the editor. I think what was it in was it May? April.
Yeah.
Or the one we're about to release.
In May,
in May.
Yeah.
Check. Look forward to that. And you see some really convincing arguments, and a lot of people are getting in the ring on both sides of this discussion. So if any of our listeners want to, please hop in, write, get in. It's a great time to be a writer for the Marine Corps Gazette.
And then June's training and education. So you want to know what's going on and what people have to say about where we're headed. The Gazette is a great place to start.
All right, so the May Gazette will drop in April around the 19th, I think. I have to check the dates, but just know that it's going to drop about 2.5-3 weeks into the month.
Also, Scuttlebutt news. We finally got around to it. We have released our Reddit page for all those Redditors, Marines out there and listeners. So if you want to, it's r/MCA Scuttlebutt, all one word. We release our episodes, and we actually Vic and I have a bunch of pro dev stuff coming down the pipeline. So we'll share links to that. And please, if you comment on our things, if you have questions or clarifications, or if you have ideas. Once we get a few more followers, we'll start having essentially hey, what do you like to talk about on Scuttlebutt issues? Because we want to make this the best for our Marines, so that y'all can do your job the best you can.
All right, we've also got, it's kind of Scuttlebutt related, a writing guide going to hit the ground here.
Yeah, that's going to fall into the pro dev. But we're going to sort of explore, for lack of a better term, sort of a for writers portal on the website for anybody who is interested not only in submitting to the Gazette, but just wants to improve their writing, or if there's leadership that wants to sort of take on the PME of making written communication stronger within their unit, within the profession of people who need to be able to write well. We're going to provide links. We got a podcast with Colonel Woodbridge. We're going to be talking about those things, the writer's guide, and little Grammarly stuff,
Also, we
tips
do
and tricks.
we do take your feedback seriously. One of our listeners emailed us and asked for certain documents to be on our website. So we're actually in the process of doing that, and hopefully should have it done in the next
firing tables.
few weeks to month or so. So yeah, please, if you have any information that you want available, or a battle study or anything in particular, like we're rolling out this content, and we would love your feedback and input.
And also, it's going to happen. I know I teased it like a month ago, but we did chat with Chief Warrant Officer 5 Tad Tomasky. I'm going to edit that up. It's a fun little sea story.
Yeah.
We're not going to release it as a full episode, but it'll be a little sea story. We'll drop it. You can listen in. It's really entertaining.
Yeah. Experiences in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Post
2000
Crimea, but pre.
Yeah. Post Orange
obviously.
Revolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I want to get that out for you guys. But the schedule being what it is, it's gonna fall in when it can.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, anything else to add to the housekeeping?
No, good to go.
That's cool.
All right. So this was our fourth talk on Ukraine. 6 weeks in.
Yeah.
We'll keep in touch, and thanks for tuning in. Next week we are going to. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have our episode with Stephen Canty, who is a documentarian, and I wish he was out before the slap. All right. Take it easy,
Bye.
people.